Hey everyone, Tom Morcus here, and welcome back to another broadcast of In the Trenches. Today's guest is Megan Reamer, who is the founder of Jackson's Honest, a healthy snack foods company. And you may have seen Megan on Shark Tank, where she was able to land an over $1 million investment from one of the sharks, and that happened in 2017. So since then, Megan has certainly scaled operations, and we talk about that in today's conversation. The primary takeaway from my conversation with Megan Reamer was this idea of product channel fit. Now, we don't go into this in depth in the call, but just upon reflection of our conversation, this is what I found to be the main thread that I found most interesting. So you'll have to listen for it to see if you pick it up. But basically, I look at product channel fit like this. There are plenty of snack companies in the world. There are fewer, but still many healthy snack food companies in the world. But the number of healthy snack food companies with their products on the shelves of Whole Foods, well, that could be counted in the hundreds, if not dozens. It's hyper competitive, but it also means you stand out. And for a product like Megan's, that's exactly the audience she wanted to get in front of. So the principle here, I think, is alignment. Is your brand story aligned with your packaging, positioning, and pricing? And are you marketing and selling in the correct channel? Specific consumers enjoy specific products delivered to them in specific ways. And what I mean is, there's a reason you don't find Teslas alongside your local Ford or Chrysler dealership. Likewise, there's a reason you don't find Old Navy's 10-for-1 t-shirt offers inside Nordstrom. Regardless if everything about the product stays the same, the quality, the feel, the taste, whatever it is, the environment in which you sell will elevate or devalue your offer. So as you listen to today's conversation, see if you can pick up on how Megan approached this product channel fit idea. And I think you'll find some relevant and useful strategies for your own marketing and sales efforts. So without further ado, let's get to the interview. So Megan, I know a lot of people know of Jackson's Honest via Shark Tank, but before we get to that point, I know you had put in many years of hard work building this company, and I think the origin story is remarkable. So can you tell me a little bit about the origin of your company, where it began, and take us back, I don't know, I think that's about 10 years or so, right?
Yes, it's quite a saga at this point.
So give us like the origin story here. What spurred it? I believe it had something to do kind of with your family, with your son. So if you could kind of talk us through that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much, Tom. I'm really excited to be here and speak with you about Jackson's Honest for sure. We started this business really to just share this product and our son's story. And so it was something that we'd been, had been part of our lives from the time he was about 2 years old. And so my son Jackson would have turned 17 last week. He unexpectedly passed away in August. So this whole story begins when he's about 2 years old, and he very slowly over a period of about 2 to 3 years. So by the time he was five or so, lost most of his gross and fine motor function. So he went from this happy walking and talking toddler to some muscle weakness in his feet that gradually got worse and then started spreading up his body. And over the course of the 3-year period, just really robbed him of functionality. So he couldn't walk anymore. He couldn't feed himself. He couldn't even talk because of the fine motor dysfunction. And so during that period, we were frantically looking for answers and taking him around the country to different specialists, and no one could figure out what was going on. For my husband and I, we had always very much valued and read labels, and I ate this clean diet, even, say 20 years ago, pre our son. And so, we were buying organic dairy and produce and, eating foods that didn't have any colors or preservatives or additives in them. And so, for us, in not understanding what was happening with Jackson and, trying to find answers from the medical community, we just pivoted and started looking at his diet to try to maintain some semblance of control over what was happening. And so because this regression looked so much like an autoimmune disease, like multiple sclerosis or Lou Gehrig's disease, we just made this pretty big assumption that that's what it was. And in doing so, we started to evaluate his diet relative to inflammation. And so we would, we kind of broke apart this macronutrient level, so fats, proteins, and carbs, and then tried to further identify foods within those macronutrients as pro or anti-inflammatory. And all we wanted to do was not contribute to more inflammation in his body. And so we fed him this very low anti-inflammatory diet from the time he was about kind of 4 years old, all the way until he died. And it really had a lot of roots in a keto diet. And then certainly, as the paleo diet evolved, we took a lot of those pieces as well. And so it was this kind of hybrid of both of those approaches, which, now are very popular, and people are really finding them and also, implementing them and living those diets and finding results on the other side. And a lot of people get there the same way we did, by, trying to address a medical need or a nutritional need. And so it was a lot of trial and error, a lot of experimentation. When we started doing this with Jackson, it was 14 years ago, and we couldn't find most of the products that we needed on the shelf. So, things like bone broth and fermented foods, sauerkraut, kombucha, these chips, for instance, because we were using them specifically, we were using coconut oil specifically for them. Even grass-fed butter, it was hard for us to find. And so, most of the things we were cooking, jerky, a good jerky it didn't exist 14 years ago. And so we made all those things from scratch. And as time went on, and the paleo movement in particular started to gain more acceptance and awareness, we started to see some of those foods pop up on the shelf. And so it became much more convenient for us to live this dietary lifestyle. But these chips, in particular, potato chips, were something that we weren't finding still on the shelf, and we were making by hand. And, we saw olive oil chips, we saw avocado oil chips, and we thought there had to be more people besides us looking for a snack food cooked in organic coconut oil. And so, without any CPG experience, my husband and I quite naively decided to launch this snack food company, starting with potato chips, which were and continue to be cooked in organic coconut oil. So that's really how we started. We kind of, I think, looked at each other and thought, we have a great product. We know they taste great, and we have a really good story to share. And it felt like the right thing to do, to share what he'd been through. And so that decision was kind of mid 2012, and we were making our chips by hand. We were bagging them, we were sealing them, we were shipping them. We were doing all of that from this tiny little mountain town in Colorado called Crested Butte. And then kind of took the next year, most of 2013, to identify a co-packer, a manufacturing facility that we could work with to scale it, because we were already having a problem meeting the demand of the orders that we had online, and just with some small independent health food stores. And so we got our first real retail distribution was January 2014. And that was with our local Whole Foods in the Rocky Mountain region.
That's an amazing story. And again, I'm so sorry to hear about your son. With everything else that's going on, like, you and your husband building this business, you have a family, obviously, having to go through the death of a son is a difficult thing for anybody, let alone somebody who's trying to build a business. And it's not like you can just really take, a few months off or something like that.
Yeah.
How did you guys kind of navigate that territory and deal with that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I'm still very much in that space of trying to find my boundaries and trying to find the space that I need to pull back when I need to, because it is, like you said, there's no window to do that, to detach at all, because it is fully, we have a tiny team as well, but Scott and I do a lot of parts of the business too, right? And so if I'm not there to process AP and AR, well, then there are big problems. And so I was very limited in the amount of space and time that I could give myself and Scott as well, immediately after Jackson died. And I think, over the last 9 months, it's been trying to figure out what that balance is. And it had become so skewed toward the business over the previous 5 years that we'd been fully engaged in building this business, that it was clearly a breaking point for us, just personally, but also in trying to, it forced that balance for us that we had been just pushing off to the side and building the business. And so, as you can try to make lemonade out of lemons, that's one of the more positive things that have come out of that experience. Just recognizing, how far out of my comfort zone I want to go, and then how far back, how do I pull that back, and how does that interact with the rest of the team, and just really getting clear on some of those things.
Yeah. And when you guys built this business, and you guys are still based in Crested Butte, right?
We are based in Crested Butte. We have an office in Boulder as well.
Again, yeah, you mentioned like kind of this, I'm actually right across the way toward the Aspen area. And so, yeah, I've been there once, and, it's definitely like, a small mountain town. What were the dynamics of starting it from there? Because you mentioned one of the big, I think, it was one of the Whole Foods in the area that was able to get you some of the packaging or distribution. Is that correct? Like, kind of walk me through that process of how you were able to start like in this area that's somewhat remote to kind of be able to break into this industry.
Yeah, I mean, we had a lot of lucky breaks. I'll say that too. I think there's a lot of luck involved in starting a small business and being an entrepreneur. And, you can control only so much of it, but you do need some of those special breaks along the way. And for us, it was having these really great partners right out of the gate. And so starting in Crested Butte, we were buying all of our potatoes from the local farmers market and from farmers that we knew there. So they were all coming out of Paonia and Hotchkiss. And, we were working around, like we were playing around with what type of potatoes we wanted to use, and what varieties, and, what farmers we were working with. Like I said, they had been good friends already. And then when we approached them about buying hundreds of pounds of potatoes from them every week, they really, went all in on it with us. And so we were able to source locally what we needed initially. And then probably within 6 months of starting the business and still making them by hand, we started selling them online. And that's where things got really wonky for us, where we had to open up sales and let people know that we had inventory, and then it would sell out within 10 minutes. And, we had made 500 bags the previous night, and then they were all gone, and I was shipping them. And then we were making more that evening. Like, we were literally frying chips every single night. They were selling out within the next day or two. And then we could never keep up with the orders. And so, probably within, I'd say 8 or 9 months of starting the business, like starting literally to make them by hand and trying to find the right commercial kitchen to work with in Crested Butte, my husband was like getting tendonitis in his elbow, and he had a regular job during the day. And so he said, like, I can't keep doing this. We need to figure out how we're scaling this, and where to find a co-packer in a manufacturing facility, which is not easy to do at all. And so, again, through a series of introductions, we found one locally in Denver, and they were well beyond our capacity. Like, they were very much kind of making chips for, say, Kroger, like at that level, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week facility. But they really liked our story, and they really liked that we'd been making them by hand, and they became a really good partner for us in teaching us about the business as well. And so, I think our initial challenges in Crested Butte were very, maybe what you'd expect of living in a small town. I mean, Crested Butte, from the Front Range of Colorado, so from Denver or Boulder, it's like 200 miles southwest. It's an even smaller town than Aspen or Carbondale or some of the other kind of mountain towns along that I-70 corridor. And so it can feel very remote. And for instance, I was shipping all of these boxes out, and, the cutoff time each day was 1:00 in the afternoon. And so, that doesn't really sound like a big deal, but getting all of that stuff packaged and ready and over to the post office or over to the FedEx pickup by 1 p.m. with 4 kids was a ton of work. And, that was after staying up till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning making the chips. And so, it was hard to find people to help us. It was hard to find, just kind of some folks to help us fry chips at night. Nobody really wanted to do that. And so, I think that, we had so much community support around launching the business, and it was definitely a head scratcher. People couldn't make the connection between, us sharing Jackson's story and talking about Jackson, and how do you link that to potato chips? Like, how did you come up with this product out of that? And it all revolved around the ingredients and why we were using coconut oil, for instance. But I think, some of the logistics challenges for us in the beginning were significant with just like trying to get product out the door.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. That's immediately kind of where my head went, is in the space of logistics in the mountains. Mm-hmm. I can only imagine what an uphill battle, so to speak. When you guys, but you were able to kind of overcome a lot of those hurdles, even like those immediate challenges of logistics and kind of getting the product out there, selling it. Let me ask you this: why did you guys apply to get on Shark Tank? I know part of it was going to be to share your story, and I know, you guys, I believe I heard an interview or read an interview where you talked about going in with no expectation necessarily to get a deal, but to share the story. So I'm just curious, from your guys' perspective, was the intention, hey, we could get a deal and that's great, but also like this could be a good just marketing and positioning for us to be able to be on this show? And then of course, what were the results?
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it best. It was a combination of things, right? And so some folks go there only for the marketing value, only for the exposure. And Scott and I very much approached it in this open space of receiving. And this is going to sound, I guess, maybe super crusted butte or ooby groovy, but just like going in there for the experience. If there was the right person, the right investor who was interested in our business with the right economics, then it made sense to do a deal. And so we didn't go in there sort of gunning for something one way or the other. Like, there are folks that go in there fully like never wanting to do a deal, just only wanting the media exposure, or vice versa, right? They only want to do a deal with this one particular shark, and they won't accept, they almost get blinders on, and they're not open to the conversation that evolves during that, hour or so that you're on the set and pitching to them. And so Scott and I really went in there with no expectation. We knew it would be great media exposure. We knew we'd reach these households and this audience that, in a marketing budget, we would never have the dollars for in any short-term, conversation. But we were also really open to doing a deal because where we were in our growth, we were the largest company they'd ever had on there revenue-wise, because we were already kind of 4 years into our business at $10 million in sales. And so, that was one of the questions we had for them. Like, this was sort of a mutual introduction to the Shark Tank crew. It wasn't quite the same process as going to an open audition and pitching to the producers and then starting to go through the process. It was a bit different, but that was one of our first questions. Aren't we too big? Are we not enough of a startup to participate in this? And their answer to us was that they wanted to show companies at different stages, and they were starting to wind that into their programming, because it's not all about being a startup. Like, where we were in our growth and where we continue to be is this real inflection point, and basically going from a startup and an early emerging brand with significant growth to kind of the next step of that, right? And so how do you now sustain those velocities? How do you grow to the next level of a 20 or 30 million or beyond company? And, what pieces do you need to have in place to do that? And so we felt like going on Shark Tank, there was an opportunity with the right shark who knew that information, or who could help kind of leapfrog some of these steps that we might have to go through in order to move forward in that growth pattern. And so it was a really wonderful, positive experience for us. Just, the whole thing, like the television part of it with, waiting in our trailer for our call and hopping on the golf cart to drive around the set, and, the craft services table, all these things that, you sort of associate with the television and the I don't want to say celebrity, that's not what I mean, but sort of that whole scene, right? The film and TV, behind the scenes stuff of how things get made, how those TV shows and films actually happen, and the bits in which they are recorded and and filmed. And so, there was that whole piece of it. Going to hair and makeup, for instance, was really fun and not something I'd likely do again, And so then there was the whole investment piece, and actually being on the set, pitching to the sharks, walking through everything with them. It was an hour-long conversation that they edited to, a 10 or 11-minute segment on the show.
Yeah, it's funny. Those are the things you just have no idea about just as a viewer, and how much is probably removed from those conversations. So they can definitely paint you in whatever light they choose. So again, I think it's speaks to how you guys performed, that they liked you well enough to make it make you guys kind of look as good as you guys had been doing too. Because I feel like I've seen some episodes where they seem to like really put some people in a bad light, and it's really tough to tell if that's the case or not. But you guys obviously crushed it. You got the investment, and you got the investment not necessarily from one of the typical sharks, but somebody who's kind of in the industry, specific to food and kind of well known in that space. So what's that process been like since? Have you guys seen a boost from, I would assume there's a big boost from the show. That's typically what I hear. But I'm curious since then, as it's been now over a year, right? I think, yes. Well, going on a year. And so I'm just curious, how has that been, besides, of course, maybe the big spike you get from it? How has that helped grow your business, and kind of where are you guys aiming next?
Yeah, I think, you definitely see a big lift immediately, even while it's airing. Our website traffic spiked considerably. Our Amazon orders really went through the roof. Certainly compared to what we'd done like the whole previous year, we did within the first few hours of airing of Shark Tank. And so, the partner that we have, his name is Rohan Oza. He was a guest shark. And he appeared a lot throughout the season. He's quite a personality, and very witty and funny and quite charming. And so I think he presents well on the show, as well as, in conversation with him on the set. It was really a good back and forth that we had. And so, working with him it's been really wonderful. He's been very accessible. He's been very supportive. And he's been really helpful with making introductions, for instance, and helping us he's a branding, marketing, strategy guy. And so he's been really helpful in conversations around, how do we create more brand awareness? What are some of the levers to pull to, get people talking about Jackson's Honest? Or how do we target this one specific geographic region? What are some of the other things you've done with other brands? And he shares that widely and frequently. And so, I don't know. I know I've heard some other people other entrepreneurs who've been on Shark Tank talk about their experiences working with more of the regular sharks, the Mark Cubans and Barbara Corcoran's, et cetera. And I think depending, they're all different on what level of engagement they provide for their companies. But Rohan for us has been really rolling up the sleeves, digging in, and trying to help us get things done. And and I'd say it's more kind of background stuff that we're working on doing than anything that you'd really see in the market or any big splash across the country with. Jackson's Honest showing up in a television ad or, just something crazy. It's really kind of putting all these pieces in place. Like, how do you build an influencer network, right? We had one. How do we add to it? What should we be looking for? And just really getting a lot more clarity around the branding and the positioning in the market and the story that we're telling. So it's been really popular for us. I mean,
that's good.
And really positive, I should say.
Yeah. And so when it comes to kind of where you guys are at now, if you can give me an idea and share whichever numbers you feel comfortable sharing, but like kind of what's the size of the company now, whether that's, again, employees, revenue, or anything else that you guys feel comfortable sharing, but also what's your goal over the next year or 2 years? Or are you doing this are you looking at this as like, a 5 or 10 year stretch? How do you perceive that? I'm kind of curious to get kind of inside your brain a little bit about kind of where you guys are at the size you're at, and what you see as next steps essentially, and what your goals are.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're a tiny team of 7 people. So that's definitely where we need to build out some of our team. On the marketing side, for instance, on the finance side, for sure. And, So we need to make some key hires in key roles, because what I think the opportunities are ahead of us are really catapulting us to that next level that I discussed. And so, going from a $10 million company to a 15 or 20 or 30 million, there are a different set of tools you need, right? Not just people wise and experience, but in decision making. There are costly decisions as a $10 million company than there were as a $1 million company, right? You could still sort of play around with it. I mean, I think for Scott and I, we feel like we have put so much effort and time and work and sweat into building the company over a 5-year period to where we are right now. That there's still so much more to do, that we're really, we have a lot of good distribution and kind of a saturation point in the natural channel. So in the Whole Foods and Sprouts and those natural stores that you see, the natural grocers, we have a lot of placement and a lot of distribution. But if you look at the conventional channel, we're just getting started in there. That's where the majority of people shop, right? That's an enormous opportunity. And so, while we can look in the rearview mirror and see how much work we've put in to get where we are right now, there's still this very wide open space ahead of us that we think we haven't even, scratched the surface of. And so, I don't know that this is a company I'll be running and he and I will be doing in 10 years or 15 or 20 years or beyond. Like, will I be handing this off to my children to run? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but I know that in certainly the next 5-year period to 8-year period, we will be continuing to grow the brand and grow the company, and really trying to get the placement and distribution that we think is open to us. I mean, we're not even in, say, the club channel, the Costco's of the country, and so that's not something we've attempted to do, and it's not something that we can economically support right now. But that's kind of rounding out when you think about what supports a healthy company, particularly in our category as a salty snack or snack food company. You need kind of all of those channels to be operating to some capacity. So it's club channel, it's food service, it's conventional, it's natural, it's e-commerce, right? So you need to be playing in all of those, and to what degree will be a function of many variables: funding, how much capital you have, the experience on your team, all of those kind of relationships you have. And so it continues to evolve, but our next sort of immediate focus is opening up the conventional channel and really getting in front of those shoppers.
Yeah, it seems like a ton of opportunity, given kind of even the size you're at, what you've already been able to accomplish, but to be able to kind of proactively say, yeah, this is the channel we're going to really double down on. I mean, I know you have to play in all those different channels, but it's just kind of interesting to kind of get the insight from where you're at and where you see as like the next immediate opportunity here. And of course, all those other ones, e-commerce, everything else you mentioned, Costco and those big wholesalers, and really exciting. I think there's like big things ahead for you guys, and it's going to be pretty interesting to see kind of where you guys go. Is there anything that you're particularly excited about when it comes to this? And is it with the business or any of these other things that you've kind of mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm excited about all of that we just talked about, all of the opportunity that exists there. I get really excited about sharing this story and talking about, truly this mom and pop company and brand, and where the origins are in Jackson's story. And then certainly, continuing to build it into his legacy. I think it provides a lot of meaning for Scott and I and the rest of our kids. We have 3 other children, and our team itself. And so everybody's, working really hard and is definitely probably overworked and underpaid at this point in this little company. But we all have this sort of mission, I think, that we're trying to execute, and it's really talking about why our products are different than the others that you'll find in that aisle and on that shelf, and then getting them in front of those customers to make those decisions. I think It's so difficult, particularly in the conventional channel. You're literally competing against like the Frito-Lay and the Kettle brand and the companies that have been around for decades and have much deeper pockets than we do. And so I think finding the right alignment there is something that we're open to doing, right? And so if that's, I'm not saying, one of those companies is going to purchase us or anything like that. It's really like, how do we start to deliver, for instance, our products in the same way that these other salty snack brands in the conventional market are delivering their products to those stores? Because it likely looks different than how we deliver our products to the natural channel stores. And so, these questions have definite answers. And so figuring out what those answers are, and then how do you evolve the business to support that? There are all these, I guess, pieces to the puzzle that we're putting in place every day with one hand while fighting some kind of fire with the other hand. And for some reason, that still really excites me. It can be enormously stressful at times, but it also feels really purposeful, I guess is a good word. And particularly in light of losing Jackson the way we did.
Yeah. Well, what a powerful story, Megan. I know everybody's rooting for you guys, and I wish you, of course, as much success as possible. And I'm sure you're going to crush in these next couple of years too, when you guys get that wider distribution, everything else you're working on. So I just want to say thank you for sharing a lot of these insights on In the Trenches. And it was just such a pleasure having you on the podcast today.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to share the story, and it was great to speak with you.
And that wraps up another broadcast of In the Trenches. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please do me a favor and go to tommorkes.com/iTunes. That's TOMMORKES.com/iTunes, and leave a rating and review for In the Trenches. Not only do I read and appreciate every review, but it helps spread the word of this podcast and allows me to continue to get on great guests. So thank you for your support, and I'll catch you on the next broadcast of In the Trenches.